Well, I would say that probably the key underlying factor falls in the difference in mentality from a military person, uh, especially one who's been deployed, to what is out there for our normal everyday life here in the United States. Like, for example, when we face obstacles here in the United States, it's almost honestly all too common for us to kind of just quit on it or back away from it and just kind of hope for the best and see what happens, and just maybe see that a lot of times some things shouldn't necessarily be dealt with. In military lifestyle, that's just not the case. It doesn't matter what the problem is. As soon as a obstacle approaches, you overcome, you adapt, you improvise, and you, for lack of better terms, annihilate whatever the problem is. It's just part of the training. It's part of the mindset. So I think where it ends up being a big disconnect a lot of times is when you are so used to dealing with things in the one way. I mean, for lack of a better term, it's almost smash it with a hammer is the default answer. But in some cases, it's not what's needed. The other thing that's really important to remember is that when you are in the military, you're surrounded by a lot of people who are like-minded, and they all have that same kind of mentality. So you can appreciate and understand where other people are coming from. But man, a lot of times a military member, when they come back from a deployment and they start seeing some of the so-called problems that people are dealing with, they have a hard time even having compassion for it because they don't feel that is a legitimate problem. And the reason why is they've learned to accept things on the course of life or death kind of scale. So if it's something that's not going to end your life, not really a problem. But that then means that we seem a little disconnected, a little cold-hearted, and obviously not very compassionate. But what ends up happening for a lot of the help that's out there is we end up with this kind of overemphasized coddling, which is certainly not what we're used to anyway. In the military, you're almost beaten into submission. The idea is you do as you're told or you're punished. And with the society when we get out, everybody's just so lovey-dovey kind of hugging that we almost see it as weak. And a lot of times it's hard to actually convey any of the real mission essential information as we would understand it from the other side, because of the fact that we just don't respect the person who's giving it to us because of the manner in which it's being presented. And that's not true in all regards, but in some cases it's simply just in the way it's being presented. The other thing I've seen that's a big issue is some of the kind of almost absolutes that are being found in this mindset. Like if someone does get diagnosed with PTSD, it's not uncommon for the soldier to almost see that as a death sentence. It's like saying that I'm broken and there is no fixing me. So it becomes very difficult for them to try and move forward and to try and become productive and grow in relationships with other people because they're fearful, in some cases, that they're going to have some sort of a lapse or cause harm to other people, and as such they distance themselves even more. It's simply because they don't want to hurt other people and they're afraid of themselves. So the other thing that's on the rise, ironically, is actually service members who are in their 60s and 70s, who were from the previous generations, the Vietnam era. They're starting to increase with their suicide rate as well. And I can't guarantee that I know that this is correct, but it seems plausible that because of the way they came home, where they had a lot of conflict even when they came home, but they were trained for conflict, then they were sent to Vietnam where they endured conflict, and then when they came home they simply had more conflict, which in a way was almost comforting because they knew how to deal with it. That's what they were familiar with. And now the conflict has finally stopped, and there's probably a double-edged sword there where they're wondering why they didn't get the help that a lot of people today are able to get, and then they feel resentful for that. Or there's also the thing that eventually just they finally hit a stage of life where things have calmed down. They're no longer in the workforce. There's no longer any problems to solve. They're actually retiring. And when that comes down, they have nothing left to deal with other than themselves. And in some cases, if they've never dealt with themselves on a very intimate level, that could be a very scary battle to fight. And it can end up leading to suicide.